to you. So now we're going to begin our panel on how to make hunting for everyone. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves in more detail. But I will. Okay, let me just make sure I can put this on.
While Salif is pulling that up, y'all might notice the QR codes on your table. We've got some pre-planned questions, but we also welcome you to send some questions in for these panelists via those QR codes. If you don't have a smartphone with you, please ask someone to help you. They can submit the question on your behalf.
All right, so here are our panelists. I'll just mention everyone kind of by name and what organization they're with, and then I'll ask my first question, which is just for them to go around and maybe introduce themselves in a little more detail, just like a minute or so per person, and then we'll dive into our panel questions, and then after our panel questions, we'll open the floor for the audience questions that you might have for our panelists, and be sending in through the Slido app that's with the QR code on your table that Kate just mentioned. Cool. So we have Jimmy Flatt from Hunters of Color. Jimmy is the Chief Operations Officer for Hunters of Color and one of the founders of that organization, for which Bianca and I are the Colorado ambassadors. We have Joshua Torrez from Afuera, Vicki Vargas-Madrid from Colorado Wildlife Federation, and here we have Anna Coburn, who is one of our local residents and a graduate of the Clark School's Immune program, and a podcast producer in town. So with that, I'll invite each person, and I'll just call on you all to tell us a little bit more in detail about yourself and why you are with or started the organization that you are in, and just a little bit about your background in hunting. So Jimmy, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks for the intro, Salif. So I guess my story started in California. I was born and raised in the Bay Area of California. I come from a mixed culture household where my dad's family is Pacific Islander and my mom's family is Latina. And I grew up with stories of my relatives and ancestors hunting, but I had never gone. So I was always interested in going and trying to find my way outside. And it wasn't until I was about 9 years old and my parents had to call the local sheriff's department to go and find me because I had missed my curfew because I was outside on the in the creeks and exploring and just lost track of time, that a family friend was like, you need to figure out how to channel that energy. And if he's interested in hunting, let's take him. And so me and my dad learned to hunt together. And that is kind of my origin story of how I got into hunting. Growing up in the Bay Area, it was so diverse. But then the second you got out into the hunting woods, go to any clubs or any nonprofit banquets, all that diversity just disappeared. And so it was an observation of mine for years and years. And growing up, I heard from all my friends of color, oh man, that's something that we don't do. That's something that is dangerous for people like us. And so I had a passion to bring more people into hunting and conservation work. And in 2016, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did a demographic study showing that 97% of all hunters identify as white. And that was the data that I needed to embark on creating Hunters of Color, a nonprofit dedicated to getting more people of color into hunting and conservation. And I guess last year in 2022, we had communities established in 10 states, and we just got over 1,000 people on their first hunting experiences in last year alone. So the organization is growing, and the joy that comes from our events and the joy that comes from Black and brown bodies outside participating in food sovereignty and just doing something that's so culturally relevant and so human is it just brings me so much joy and recharges my battery every time I see a success story coming from our events.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Next, I'd like to ask Vicki to introduce herself and just tell us a little bit more about why you're here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vicki Vargas-Madrid, and I sit on the board of the Colorado Wildlife Federation. I also work for Denver Parks and Recreation as the Education and Wildlife Program Manager. I have a long career in wildlife management through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I was there for 33 years. I retired there and then went and worked for Denver Parks and Recreation. But I did not grow up in a hunting family, and I started working for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. At that time, it was Division of Wildlife. And honestly, I did not, again, because my family didn't hunt, we did fish and we camped, but I needed a job at that time. You know, I was right out of high school and I was getting ready to go into college, and I needed a job. So I started working for CPW. And at that time, I wasn't even familiar with what the agency was about. And until I got that job and started spending more time in the outdoors and realizing what the agency was all about, you know, bringing people into the outdoors, hunting and fishing. Thankfully, I didn't go into the job with an attitude that, oh my gosh, hunting, fishing, what is that and why would I want to do it? It was really I had to develop this love for it, even though I think internally I had it because of my family history in camping and fishing, camping and fishing and just being in the outdoors. You know, our outdoor playground was Denver parks and alleyways and river bottoms and those open spaces that we considered our natural playground. So as I worked in the agency and got to spend time outdoors and spend time with the local wildlife officers, I decided that was for me. This is what I love, and this is just bringing out that internal, I think, subconscious love that I had for nature that sparked my interest in doing what I do today. So as I worked towards my career with Division of Wildlife and worked toward my degree while I was working in wildlife management, I became a wildlife officer and was a wildlife officer in the Denver metro area for 18 years. And I was hooked. You know, that's what I was meant to do. And I think when I retired from the state agency and now with Denver Parks, I am so lucky to be able to have that same love, because I still do wildlife management and I'm still able to educate the public. And even though the way I got into the issues of wildlife and hunting and fishing, it is, you know, a little bit different maybe than other people's experiences. You know, I developed it just from my career, and I'm now able to share my passion and my love for the outdoors with the public. And in Denver, in the inner city, where folks don't have those everyday opportunities, like me growing up, my family went camping once a year to the mountains. But our outdoor experiences were those inner city experiences where we could go to a local park and go to the local lake and fish and enjoy our outdoors, even if it was just, my mom would kick us out of the house and say, go make yourself busy. And my brothers and I would head to the local creek bottom and hang out there all day. So we made our recreation, but in the more urban areas that we considered our connection to nature.
Thank you so much. And then Joshua, if you will just tell us a little bit about your background and Afuera, just a minute or so, and then we'll dive right into the questions.
No problem. I'll jump right in. Joshua Torrez, founder of Afuera. So I grew up fishing with my dad and my grandfather, and those moments were really special to me, just as I look at them as an older man. And I kind of, as I've recognized that piece of my life is something that I wanted to kind of give back. So I became a board member for the Colorado Wildlife Federation, and in that time, I was simply just a fly fisherman at that time. And I wanted to learn more about hunting, so I engaged in all of the intro hunting activities that they had, anywhere from pheasant hunting to deer hunting to you name it, and really appreciated everything that came with that. But I also recognized that there was not a lot of Latinos sitting in those rooms with me and learning. And then I, kind of recognized that, maybe some of those classes could probably be in bilingual opportunities as well. And so as I became a board member of the Wildlife Federation, I kind of started to understand more about just how animal management worked and just the value of it, and wanted to kind of get that information out to the Latino population. And so I started Afuera, and we started doing inner city fishing, bilingual activities for children. And what it did is just give these children an opportunity to recognize how beautiful hunting and fishing is. When you see the face of your first catch of a fish, is just super beautiful. So for me, it's been progressively growing just from fishing with my dad in the creek in Leadville, Colorado, catching little small little guys and eating them, and kind of growing through that to Afuera, which is starting to grow and expand. So we're really excited.
Thank you so much. And I embarrassingly forgot our in-person panelist right here. So I'll let you, Anna, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, I'm Anna. I am a graduate of the MBA program here at Western. I graduated in 2020. I do a lot of things in the Valley. I'm definitely part of the Gunnison Valley hustle. I have 3 jobs at any given time, but my main job is a range technician at the Forest Service. That's what I do in the summers. And I grew up in Alabama, so everybody hunted and fished, at least in my bubble. And I grew up hunting with my stepdad, but it was a very different culture. A lot of it was hunting camps where you have people who plant green fields, and then you sit in a tree stand or a shooting house and you wait for your white-tailed deer to come for its breakfast or its supper, and then you get your deer. It was very upper middle class, white, mostly men that I was surrounded with hunting. So for several years, I backed out of it, didn't think it was for me, didn't think I could fit in at all. And then it was actually coming to the MBM and being surrounded by people who were tree huggers and recycled, but also hunted, which was totally off script. That inspired me to get back into it.
Thank you. And I'd like to point out something that I know that was really interesting. All of us up here represent some type of marginalized or underrepresented group in the fields of hunting and fishing. And almost all of us are first generation hunters or anglers. And I think that's something of note just to keep in mind. So I'm going to dive in with the first question. And because we have the panelists might not be able to tell the order or something like that, I'll go ahead and just call on each one to give their answer. So our first question, and we have about 45 minutes for all 4 questions. So maybe just a few minutes per question, and then we'll see if we'll let the audience also ask follow-up questions at the end. Our first question is to please share with us a story or an example of how hunting and or fishing has made you a stronger environmental steward. Why don't we go ahead and start with Anna here, so I don't forget her again, and then we'll dive into the Zoom panelists.
Cool. So I have a pretty good story. So I was here at the MEM, and a good friend in my cohort at the time, Gabrielle Zaldambide, you might have heard her name. She's a huge part of the hunting and fishing community here in the Valley. She took me out rabbit hunting, and it was a cold January day, and I was very nervous because it had been a very long time since I had killed anything other than bucks for several years, but I wanted to get one. And so we went out, and we both got one. And one of the things that was powerful for me was I had this overwhelming urge to kneel down and pick up our rabbits and thank it. And that's something that I've done ever since, is thank a rabbit, even though I'm the one who killed it. But thank it for providing me with a meal, for being a living thing, for having a lot of respect for it. But I think the most powerful thing that kind of was life-changing for me was gutting the rabbit. Now, I hadn't done anything but dissect a rat in college. I'd never opened anything up to harvest the meat from it. So I was worried I was going to be really grossed out. And it was actually a really fascinating and humbling experience for me to open that rabbit up, and it's not that much different for me. It has a diaphragm, it has guts, it has a heart and a set of lungs, and I'm very fragile, and I am the same. And so it further solidified this idea that I am amongst these animals. I am an animal amongst these animals, rather than this, something that Erica touched on a little bit briefly last night. I don't conquer these animals. I don't have dominion over these animals. And so ever since then, gutting an animal or harvesting an animal has been a very cool experience for me. I don't get grossed out. It's kind of a tender moment, pun not intended. And it kind of, it definitely is something I think about very often, embarrassingly so, about innards and how we're all connected through that, and we're all living things. So that made me definitely a better environmental steward in the way that I see the world around me.
Thank you. I actually started to tear up at the moment where you said the idea of thanking it for being a living thing. So not just for its life to provide you, but for its participation in the natural world. So that's really cool. Let's go ahead and hear from Joshua. How has hunting and fishing made you a stronger environmental steward, especially a particular story?
Really, it's just been my story of kind of falling into being a hunter and falling into conservation, because I was just an angler that owned my own business and was asked to speak for the Arkansas River for the National Monument, and kind of represent a Latino, version of that idea, why it's so beautiful and why I loved it so much. And that put me on the board to the Colorado Wildlife Federation, therefore kind of teaching me like, hey, as a hunter, you do have a voice. And then as that's progressed, as the Colorado Wildlife Federation progressed me, it also taught me that I, as a brown man or a color man of color, also has a voice. And the National Wildlife Federation has flown me out to Washington, D.C. and set me at the table a couple of times to kind of speak to, our representations and things like that. So it's just my whole story of just starting fishing has just completely changed me into a steward of the environment, just as I progressed through this great process.
Thank you so much. How about Vicki? Let me know if
Yes.
any of you ever need me to repeat the question. Sorry.
Yeah, would you please?
Yes. So please share with us a story or an example of how hunting or fishing has made you a stronger environmental steward.
Yes, okay. So as I said earlier, I didn't grow up hunting, did grow up fishing. We did fish in the city. But I think for me, it's really just been my career. As I said, I started working for the Division of Wildlife right out of high school as I was working toward my college degree, and just the experiences that I had within the agency, spending time in the outdoors and doing ride-alongs with our wildlife officers and biologists and folks that were spending all of their time day by day in the field, helped me develop that love, even though I know I had it just from my childhood experiences. But I would say that the real moment for me was the first time I went hunting. And it was with my husband. It was before we got married, and he actually comes from a hunting and fishing family. His dad took him and his brothers hunting since they were little, right? When they were able to actually go out. His dad was a hunter education instructor. So when I met my husband, this is what they grew up with. And I'm here working for a fishing and wildlife agency and didn't hunt. Wasn't against it. I just, it's not something that I had done. So he took me on my first hunt, and he had a license and I did not. So I was just there, participating and supporting it. And I remember the first time that he shot a deer. And it was this moment in my life that I had never experienced before, when I saw the deer go down. And my husband was very appreciative of the deer. And when we went up to it, I wasn't sure what to feel. I felt bad for the deer, but I also saw the appreciation and respect that he had for this animal that he had just killed, right? And we knew that was going to, provide us some meat, and we would be able to share it with our families. And I cried. I actually sat there while he was thanking the deer, and I don't think I at that time had the same appreciation that he did for the deer, because I was so hurt by it. It was an experience that I saw happen, and just not understanding what had just happened. So after that first hunt, I had to help myself understand those feelings that I had gone through. And when I went back to my job, the next week it was, still having that feeling, I knew I had to somehow understand what those feelings were about. And I was talking to my father-in-law at that time, wasn't my father-in-law yet, asking him about his experience with teaching hunter education, and how he taught was able to teach people how to hunt, and how he would explain the experiences that people would have when they were successful in a hunt. So at that time, I remember us having these really deep conversations about that, and helping me understand that everyone has these different experiences when they start to hunt, and that just happened to be mine, and how I moved on from that. Everybody's individual, and everybody's experiences are going to be different. But after that happened, I became a hunter education instructor, and that helped. And today, till this day, I still teach hunter education. But that experience will always be with me, but I now can understand it and appreciate it more than I did when, I first experienced it. But I really think that that was the moment in my life and my career that helped me understand not only why was I hunting, why did I become a hunter? My husband and I hunt together now. And I love teaching hunter education and my experiences to other people now, because I've developed, I understand, I understand the conservation piece of it, and I want other people to see that and have similar experiences.
Thank you. One thing you made me think of or remember is that as I got into hunting and was trying to consume a lot of videos and read articles by people to kind of get a better understanding, one of the things I hadn't expected that I encountered very often was that experience of the kill being a very bittersweet moment. Very often hunters of all genders, people who were, had been hunting for countless generations in their family, as well as first generation hunters, talking about shedding tears over the animal that they had just killed. And so a very common acknowledgement of that bittersweet moment of taking a life and also being successful in something very difficult. Jimmy, would you like to share your story? And do you need me to repeat the question?
I've got the questions up in front of me. But a story that comes to mind is kind of where my conservation ethos started. After I started to learn how to hunt and was really diving in, my mom, as we're sitting around the table and I'd be coming home with limits of ducks or turkeys or whatever it was, my mom would always ask me the same question. So you're taking from the land, how are you giving back? And I didn't know how to process that as a 12-year-old. But my mom gave me tools to give back. So she said, if you don't have time to give, if you don't have money to give, you can give your voice in some kind of way. And so I'm grateful that my mom was a conservation mentor of mine. She really pushed me to find ways to give back. And so when I got into high school, I started volunteering for local conservation orgs, local land trusts that I could do land stewardship events with. I volunteered with Ducks Unlimited to make sure that they were helping with the habitat that I was utilizing all the time to bring food home. And yeah, so that's kind of where my ethos came from, is realizing that I was taking from the land. And at the time when I was younger, I wasn't doing anything to give back. And it was a huge importance in my family to make sure you're giving back, because I think from my mom's standpoint, she came from a country where there is unregulated hunting, and in the blink of an eye, it could have all disappeared and it wouldn't have been there for anybody to utilize. And she really wanted to make sure that was ingrained in my being as I became a hunter.
Cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to our next question, which is, and it's a little bit long. How have you seen or experienced institutionalized systems of marginalization, for example, racism, sexism, heterosexuality or cisgender normativity, classism, and or ableism? How have you seen those things manifest in the hunting and fishing world? And part two, how can we make hunting fishing culture more inclusive and healthy for everyone? We'll just go in the opposite order, so I'll give it back to you, Jimmy.
This could become a TED Talk, but I'll try to keep it somewhat brief. So if you look at barriers to entry into hunting, at least the ones that Hunters of Color deals with on a day-to-day basis, the lowest hanging fruit is representation. But then you got to look at why is representation so bad. And so we, as an organization, we bring it back to the first hunters of the land, and that's the indigenous communities across the nation who were hunting for thousands and thousands of years in perfect harmony and balance with the ecosystem, where conservation was not even a word in a lot of, or actually most indigenous languages. And so what happened to the original hunters was that they were stripped from their land, brought to usually desolate, barren wastelands where food resources were scarce. And so that's kind of the history of hunting in this country. It all started from there, or at least modern hunting started from that standpoint. And then that's manifested. So you can look at all other cultures and marginalized groups in this country, and they all have a similar story. But it's manifested in that who has the power and who has the ability to go out and participate. And historically, again, there have been privileges granted to our white siblings to procure land, to have access to land, to have more income. These are all backed in fact, and are things that allow people to recreate. Instead of spending all your time trying to bring in more money, recreation is something that you do when you're not making money, when you're not providing, or you're doing something that is for the soul, for you. And so there's, without diving in too much, this could be its own separate call. I'd say, to jump into the second part, what is that? How can we make hunting and fishing culture more inclusive and healthy for everyone? So I think is really noticing and realizing your own privileges. If you recreate, if you are a hunter, if you are a fisherman, even if you know how to hike, you have privilege. You have knowledge that some people don't have, especially in the BIPOC community. And if we are to make hunting and conservation inclusive and more accessible and more representative of what the country looks like, we need people who have that privilege, who have broken down those barriers to entry on their own, to extend a hand out and invite people into the fold and show them that it is something that we can all do. It is accessible to everybody in this country. You just have to find the ways to make it accessible to you and the way that you want to recreate as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that answer. Next, let's hear from Joshua. And let me know if you need the question again.
No, I'm good. I guess like economic disparities, I think has really been kind of the thing that sticks out to me the most. And like a perfect example is even just myself when I transitioned from fishing with the worm to fly fishing. Just access to that equipment is super expensive. It's really, first of all, you don't know what you're getting, and then you don't know what to get, and then you're trying to find equipment that's not so cheap that it's going to fail on you out there, but you want something that's good enough, and then as I started hunting and, shotguns and things like that, those come with the expense too. So I feel like just the access. So like, Afuera, when we have our activities, we give away a fishing pole, because I think that even if they want to go out and have these moments and recreate, they don't have the access to the actual equipment to do so. So that's really where I kind of see the biggest, the toughest thing, and just kind of, and then the other thing is just kind of fitting in, as a person of color amongst, a bunch of folks that have kind of been there, been doing it, and you're kind of wondering if you're wearing the right stuff, if you got the right equipment, just all those little small things. So I feel like having access to cheap equipment, having companies out there that are willing to make equipment that, it's not necessarily going to last somebody for the rest of their life, but it'll give them, an opportunity to go fishing for a full year, or just being able to get secondhand shotguns for children that want to learn, and rifles. I think that, not being able to buy something new is really hard, but understanding that there are other options, and older equipment is just as well, and it will get you to the same point as other things will. So that's kind of my thoughts on that one.
Thank you so much. And Vicki, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, from a personal standpoint, I think as a kid growing up, I really don't think I recognized racism and, marginalization taking place in the same ways that my parents did. As again, we fished and we camped and spent time in our local parks, but maybe it was just because, I was young, immature, and I really didn't know that when it was happening to my parents, I just didn't know the difference. But I do have memories of, of being stereotyped, and I've experienced prejudice not only in my job, but even in as a Latina, going to a park, and our family going to a park and enjoying the outdoors. I remember a time when, as a young child, my dad took us out fishing to a local lake, and we were pulling out our fishing gear out of the car. And as my dad was handing us some fishing poles and tackle, I remember a guy that walked up to him and put his face near my dad's as if he was whispering in his ear, and said, "Mexicans don't fish here. Go back to the fields where you belong." And I remember my dad. I'll never forget the look on his face, this disparity and sadness that I had never seen before. And my mom and my brothers and I were just in awe. We didn't understand what had just happened, but I knew it was something pretty disappointing for my parents. So my dad took our fishing gear from us, put it in the back of the car, and we left, and we went home. So although I don't know what that was at that time, my parents did. And that was, one way that we saw this happening time after time, being in the outdoors. We just didn't belong. You're a different color, you don't belong here. So I think those stereotypes are there. They probably always will be. You know, we all have that unconscious bias within us. And it's up to those of us who are here today and people like us that need to share these experiences with one another and help others understand that it is okay. We do belong. It is okay for us to be out there fishing and hunting. And even if you're not hunting and fishing, we all have a love and respect for the natural world, and we all experience it in different ways. And it doesn't matter who you are, what race you are, what sex you are, it doesn't matter. We all have that connection within ourselves. So, you know, that's just a story as growing up that I will always remember. Even my dad brings it up even every once in a while when I got into the career that I am in today. And he talks about that. And he never thought that I, his daughter, you know, I'm the only girl in the family with 3 brothers that would get into a career like this, not growing up in a hunting family. So we do talk about those experiences and what my parents went through too. I think as a wildlife officer, and my career with CPW has just enhanced my desire to want to change those types of things from happening and get people in the outdoors and help people develop a love for nature that they always have within themselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, all of you. Anna, would you like to share your thoughts on and experiences?
Sure, I'm glad that we talked about, that we mentioned that bittersweet moment of being pretty sad when you give your life. And that I think is what catalyzed me away from thinking that I was part of hunting, because of the way the culture was back where I grew up. And I grew up very privileged, and I still am. I'm white, mostly straight passing. Maybe if I don't have this vest, it would be a little more so. But I grew up in this very macho Budweiser hunting community, right? That was, my stepdad shot the state record in 1989 of a whitetail. So it was very much about the points on the rack. It was very much about getting the prize deer, not with a lot of disrespect or cruelty, but there was a disconnect. And I remember every time I shot a deer, I would have this huge wave of adrenaline and then get really, really, really sad. And I think I was 15 and it was the last deer I shot. My stepdad noticed and he was like, I know you're sad, I know you're sad, but God gave us animals to use however we would like. They're for us, just like the earth. And he was trying to be very comforting. He was so sweet in that moment, but I remember deep down going, I'm not comforted by that at all. It didn't make me feel any better, it made me feel worse. And so not fitting in these mostly male spaces, I've always felt very uncomfortable on youth hunts. I was the only girl typically, but then that thought process that that I have so much superiority, it was just like, no, this doesn't work for me. And I just assumed that would be the case for the rest of my life. But now, you know, as I mentioned before, things have definitely changed and shifted in my brain. I still get overwhelmingly sad, but I have kind of a rule that if I stop being sad, then I should probably rethink hunting. But as far as making it for everyone, I think we just have to work very hard to change that narrative of what people largely think hunting is, which is more of a stereotype of what I grew up doing, shifting that narrative and working hard to make it more of this, knowing where your meat comes from, having this connection to what you're eating, and also representation. Because I don't know maybe I can count on one hand how many queer people hunt. It's just something you don't do. And as a queer person, it just doesn't fit the script, right? And so, like an environmentalist, like Kate said earlier. And so knowing that people have such nuanced lives and nuanced hobbies and the way that they want to live can be so different. It doesn't have to fit into any script.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks all of you for being vulnerable. I want to move on to not the last question. We have two more. The next one is kind of a connection of the first two. What is the connection you see between the stewardship piece, which was the first question, has hunting, fishing made you a better environmental steward? So what's the connection between that steward piece and the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice piece that we just talked about? How are those things connected in your mind? And we'll start with Vicki.
So I think they're very much connected. The steward piece is, to me, very important in the sense that we need folks like all of us to bring that connection, to bring the two together, to bring these experiences and knowledge that we have to folks who, to others that want to be engaged in nature, in hunting, in fishing, whatever it is that they love. Without that stewardship, I think it would be harder to get other people involved, to get people interested and engaged in the natural resources that we all are so blessed to have. So they go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other, to be honest, because as stewards, I consider myself a steward of conservation. And if I didn't share my experiences and, I'm fortunate in the field that I am to have all of these great natural resource experiences that parts of my other family don't get to have. Not that they don't want to, it's just that, I get to be out in the mountains on whatever day I decide I want to and experience a bald eagle flying across the cliffs, where they may not see that as often as I do. But if as a steward, if I'm able to share those experiences with them and bring my love for what I do to them, to offer those experiences, then they too, if they want to, can go out to those places as well, or get more involved with it. I mean, that's why I teach hunter education, because I truly believe it. We have to, that's how we get more people out there. And, I like to teach specific hunter education classes just for youth, or for women only, so that we're getting some of these other underserved groups out to these places so they too can enjoy what we all do. I just think they go hand in hand, stewardship and people who love nature.
Thank you so much. Jimmy, what do you think about this connection?
So one thing I like to say all the time is you can't, or you won't care about something that you don't know about. And I think one of the most intimate connections you can have to nature and to the natural resources is through hunting, because you're not just observing, life and the natural resource, you're participating in it. You're inserting yourself into the circle of life, and you're looking at the environment in a much different way. But our natural resources are supposed to be held in the public trust, and we are all a part of the public. But if you look at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service study, the newest one just came out, and it's still like 90 or 82% white participation. So there's a huge chunk of our country, and primarily the BIPOC community, who's not participating in hunting and conservation work. And I think it's shameful, because we all should be taking a part of it. We should all have ownership of this thing that is supposed to be ours. So I think where DEIJ comes in is into the stewardship aspect is, one, we need to have people more invested. And to do that, we need to have more inclusion. And when we're all taking part of this, and we all have ownership of the natural systems that we all hold in public trust, that's when we'll start seeing some form of justice in the outdoor environmental spaces.
Thank you so much. And I think those reports you've shared each year's kind of report with me in terms of those statistics. And it always is pretty shocking, especially the first, I don't remember which year that was, but we're only 3% of hunters identified as a person of color. And that was pretty staggering to me. Anna, what are your thoughts on the connection between DEIJ and stewardship?
I wasn't sure how to answer this question until like 8 p.m. yesterday. But I think it goes back to, for me personally, gutting that rabbit for the first time. I experienced such an ego death there. And it kind of infiltrated the way that I think about other people too, because we all have had experiences of superiority over other people, right? Obviously. And so now that, I don't know, that thought process has been stripped down so much, it's kind of bizarre how we don't take care of each other when we're just these fragile living beings, that we value power so much and oppression so much still. And so I think by being a better environmental steward, being a better steward to wildlife and living animals, you can also be better. It goes hand in hand with being better stewards to each other.
Thank you. And Joshua, last but not least, what is your, where do you see the connection between stewardship and diversity, inclusion, and justice?
For us, I mean, really kind of what we're focused, the Latino population is growing rapidly, and where Afuera focuses on is more so on the children. If we can offer these children an experience of being in the outdoors and getting that feeling and getting that passion, then we're developing future stewards, right? Like people that are going to be voting towards conservation. So for us is if we can give them the experience, then they're going to vote towards conservation, which therefore helps all of us. But if we're not educating people on all those things that are great about being in the outdoors, then they just don't even pay any mind. So that's really kind of how I see the connection is, especially at a younger age, growing these young folks up into folks that care for the environment and have been taught that at a young age at one of our events or things like that give them that experience that they can see a future outlook of being conservationist.
Thank you. The common thread that I saw through all 4 answers is that these activities are a process of ongoing learning all the time, and that learning is this connection between learning about an activity like hunting, getting more diverse people, which also brings in more diverse perspectives and mindsets that then can apply their backgrounds to conservation and to stewardship. So thank you all for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Our last formalized question is simply if there's anything our panelists would like to share that wasn't captured in the first three questions. So Joshua, is there anything that you would like to add that just wasn't captured in our other questions?
Not right offhand. I'm just super grateful that you give me an opportunity to speak with you guys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And again, we will have time for audience questions following this last one. Anna, anything you'd like to say or add?
Pretty much same answer. I'm excited to get your question.
Awesome. Well, at that, so far, I've done a great job writing questions that need no expansion on. So yay me. Vicki, anything you'd like to add in addition?
Maybe this will come up in some questions, but just a comment or just to say that I think it's moving forward. It's important that we as stewards take our experiences and our learnings to folks that don't have the opportunities. And I just think about my whole career in conservation and education. And one of the things that I personally and professionally haven't done enough of is take them to these folks, to people who have that love. We always expect for those folks to come to us. But if they don't know those experiences or have those experiences, they're not going to come to us. So it's up to us as stewards to go to those communities and those folks that we want to reach out to. We can't expect them to come to us.
Thank you so much. I've received a few audience questions already. Just a reminder that the page on your table with the QR code, you can scan and type in your question and I'll get it right here and we'll kind of curate the questions for our panelists. So I'll go ahead and begin with, oh, I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I'm so sorry. What would you like to add, if anything, to that wasn't captured by the other questions?
Not a lot. I think, again, it comes back to sharing your power and privilege. And then again, back to my mom's teachings. If you have time to share your time. If you don't have time, think about sharing some other kind of resource. So money or your voice. Advocate for people of color and other marginalized groups to get outdoors and tell stories. Tell other people's stories of success and just appreciate the fact that we can all get outdoors. And I think the biggest thing though is like a lot of us have missions and there's no mission without money. So please consider donating to different groups that you guys align with in their missions. If you want to see more youth getting out into the outdoors, try to find a youth group. And there's a plethora of groups that are working on different marginalized groups. So I just want to throw that out, that there's always a way to help and give some kind of resource to these missions.
Thank you. And I'll just say that my oversight was no reflection on Jimmy, but purely a function of my ADHD. Okay, so now I'd like to ask, begin with the questions. And the first one is to all the panelists, what has been one of the biggest successes of your platform or programs? And at this point, y'all can kind of raise your hand or just whoever has an answer would like to go first may do so. Jimmy.
So something that comes directly to mind is one of our mentees from New York City. She had never been outdoors before, but saw one of our flyers and signed up for the hunt. Came out, and a year down the road, she has already started to create her own outdoor business where she's going to open up a retailer in New York City for people to start realizing that is something that they can do, because she had never been outdoors before. The furthest she had ever been out of the city was a couple 20 or so miles, and she changed her entire career path because of one experience that she had. And I think that's the power of bringing people out and showing them that it is something we can all do. And it's not dissimilar from my story. It's something like I fell so in love with this that I wanted to share this to everybody in my community. And she wants to do the same thing. She wants more people to have access to something that she fell in love with.
Thank you. Who else would like to respond to that question of your program's biggest successes? John?
Yeah, so for the last couple of years, we've been doing an event in downtown Denver, putting 500 fish into the lake, giving around 400 fishing poles away, and just inviting Latino families into the park, and being able to kind of eat and fish and catch fish, and just understand anywhere from conservation to catching, to understanding why fishing is so fun and being a part of the family. And we'll continue that for the next, I think, 3 years for right now. But we're just that one event alone is just kind of really showing the success of the community of Denver coming together. Although the lake might not be the most beautiful lake, it is a lake and it holds fish, and those fish can be caught, and it brings, and everybody walks away with that fishing pole. So we really appreciate kind of those opportunities to do that.
Thanks. That's incredible. 400 fishing poles. That's a big number for that. But Anna or Vicki, do you have a response to that question? No pressure. Yeah, Vicki.
I think I have quite a few, but I think one of the ones that really stands out for me is, as I said, not growing up in a hunting family. When I became a hunter and started teaching hunter education, I taught hunter education to 3 of my nephews. And they, thankfully, I took them on their first hunt. This was years ago, of course, when they were younger, but they were probably 12 or 13 years old at that time. And I took them into the field. They had their first pheasant hunt, and they have become life hunters. And it was their best experience that they ever have told me in their whole life. So we still talk about it, and yeah, that just getting somebody out there that has never done it before and continues through their life. So even if they don't, them having that once in a lifetime experience, feeling is made me feel good. So.
Well, thank you. Anna, did you have a response?
Well, unlike these folks, I'm not part of a group, but I'd say just the biggest success from my experience has been how many friends of mine that are largely queer women in the valley are interested in hunting and going out with me, especially rabbit hunting, and I think that's pretty cool.
Cool. And so I'll just, on that note, this next question is very related. How can we create a safe space for LGBTQIA plus individuals in the hunting community, especially in rural areas that could feel unwelcoming? And the question's for anyone, but your last answer kind of was in the spirit of that. So
I'd say strength in numbers. I think going out in groups is a really great experience. That's what makes me love it so much, is not only being successful, but having a friend with me or friends with me. And I think that's a good start to having more of a buffer, just in case there is any negative experiences out there, especially with the zoo of over-the-counter third season rifle or something, and how everyone's in very close proximity. I think that yeah, strength in numbers is my opinion.
Cool, yeah, thanks. Does anybody else have an answer for that? Getting more, making it more welcoming, or how to create a safe space for the LGBTQ plus community?
I have just a little snippet. So we have, for our mentorship curriculum, we have an anti-racism training, and I would love to see somebody develop something that is similar for the LGBTQ A plus community as well. But yeah, that is something that helps allies kind of understand some of the barriers to entry, some historical context, and it gives tools to being more inclusive and creating an environment where people feel that they can come and live freely without the fear of being marginalized or oppressed.
Does anybody else have an answer for the LGBTQIA plus question? Okay. The next one I'd like to ask, and very interested in hearing your thoughts on, is how can we avoid the idea of white saviorism when talking to folks about diversity in hunting? Yeah. I feel you on that one.
I would say the biggest thing is if you are a white hunter and coming into the space trying to pass on your knowledge, is coming in knowing, or with an attitude that you don't know everything, that you still have room to grow, and that you're also on a growing path, and having an open heart and open mind when you enter spaces that don't look like you and don't talk like you, because one of the worst and most harmful things that you can do is kind of either, like, for lack of better terms, like mansplain hunting and make people feel like you're belittling them, and so I think, again, is just coming in with an attitude of that we're all on the same learning path and that we all have room to grow.
Yeah. Anybody else want to respond to that? No, you're good, Joshua. Was that
was
a
great.
raise your hand?
That was
or-
I would just say, also, just going off of what Jimmy just said is, yeah, definitely come in with an open mind, but also, don't be afraid to educate yourself about these issues that surround people of color and, you know, the LGBT groups. We all are here to learn, and we can learn from one another. So just be open-minded about that. Be willing to take it in and try to understand those various perspectives.
Thank you. The next question is, how do we promote hunting ethically in a society that is overrun with gun violence and turn the spear into knowledge?
I'll start off with saying that we do a lot of archery programs. Communities of color, at least in our experience, have gravitated towards archery more so than guns because of the trauma that has plagued our communities. And archery is a longer learning curve, but if you are an archer, consider that as a way to teach the next generation. There's a lot of information that's involved in archery, and yeah, there's always something you can teach. I'd also say that we owe it to ourselves and our communities to empower ourselves around guns as well, and kind of take back the narrative that they're dangerous and they cause harm, but utilize them to create good and feed our families and perpetuate our own stories with the use of these tools.
Yeah, and I just personally add, kind of like I stated in the introduction, that I've overcome a fear of firearms and those types of weapons by learning more through hunting, realizing that I am still the human with the brain behind the tool, and by learning how to use it safely, am in control of that dangerous weapon that does deserve respect. Did anybody else want to respond? Vicki?
And we try to promote in our hunter education classes for folks who don't or want to get into hunting, to still take our hunter education classes, because we're still teaching about firearm safety, and people get to shoot a .22 rifle in the range, and helping them to get comfortable around firearms. And it's amazing the amount of people that we get signed up in our classes that really aren't there necessarily for hunting. It's definitely an option for them, but that's not their primary reason for taking the class. It's because they want to get comfortable with being around firearms and learning the safety aspect of them.
Yeah, and just from a personal experience, my father was a Vietnam vet, so we never had guns around the house at all. So I had to kind of grow into them by myself and learn. And as I kind of took those education courses, I was able to better understand, how to handle them, how to be safer with them. And now I feel comfortable with them. So it's just really the education piece that comes with it, or came with it for me, to make them more of a tool than something that scares me.
Cool, thank you. I'm still kind of trying to pick the next question. I'll go with this one because I think it's kind of interesting and very practical and kind of an applied, how do we do this question? What programs are out there where people can, quote, recycle their older or unused gear for people who may be interested in hunting and fishing?
Well, you can donate to Hunters of Color or other nonprofits. All of your donations will be tax deductible. There are also gear lockers set up around different areas. I think there's one in the Denver area. I forget who runs it, but the gear lockers are huge because it removes the financial barrier to accessing gear. And like Joshua said, old gear is just as good as the new stuff. So anything that can be donated. The Hunters of Color community in Gunnison could utilize it for events. So yeah, consider donating it to a local nonprofit.
And even if not like a permanent donation, a lending, the last Hunters of Color shooting event in Gunnison, which was just kind of an introduction to firearms event, we had several people lend us different weapons for the event, so that we could give our attendees a broader breadth of different types of tools and things they could use. So that's also something you can do, is lend if you don't want to completely donate something. Anybody else on what programs exist for finding used or recycled equipment?
No, I just want to say that I was not aware of entities out there that will take in old hunting clothes and unused clothes. So thank you, Jimmy, for that, because those are definitely resources that we can pass along to our hunter education students.
Joshua, were you gonna say something? Okay, and even locally, All Sports Replay, a lot of people think of them for skiing and biking gear, but they also usually have a selection of, hunting clothes, backpacks. I've seen several fishing rods, waders, tackle boxes, things like that. Obviously, when it comes to used gear, there are a lot more restrictions for good reasons on, purchasing firearms. So, you'd have to still go through a store and get a background check done and things like that. But any of us are really happy to talk with you more about that if you come find me later or something like that, kind of that process and what it looks like. Especially there is a way that people can gift you a firearm and you'd still do a background check, but that is also possible. If someone would like to give you one, you just have stuff to do a check. Cool. I kind of like this, where is that? Oh, to all panelists, what are your favorite hunts? Favorite general locations, emphasis on the word general, seasons, animals, and methods. What do you recommend as a good first experience?
Well, we can't give away our secret places. Just kidding.
Very general location recommendation.
Sorry, I just butted in. For me, I really enjoy dove hunting. So I like to find places out east. I live in the Denver metro area, so places out east where you can find a really nice landowner that would like doves taken out of their property and will let you on. There's some really cool river bottoms. But really, depending on the species that you hunt, depends on the land that you're going to go to. So, so as far as big game goes, deer and elk and all of those critters, you hunt in a particular area that you have to apply for a license for, right? But for small game, if you're just getting started into hunting, such as dove hunting or pheasant hunting, a lot of those spaces are private property on the eastern plains of Denver. So you do have to get permission or find a landowner. But I always tell people if that's really something that you're interested in, don't be afraid to knock on somebody's door. A landowner out east, for example, in Kiowa or Elizabeth, Colorado, or Strasburg, and let them know you're a new hunter, especially for youth. They will let kiddos go onto their properties to hunt small game. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there and knock on a door and introduce yourself and let them know that you're a new hunter and if you can hunt on their property.
Thank you. Others, what are your favorite hunts? Go ahead.
So I think my favorite style of hunting is like a float hunt. I love to just be on the water and let the river do the walking for me. And you can also fish while you're going down the river. So it's kind of a cast and blast style, but I would say that what I have found to be the best introductory hunt is something with a shotgun. Usually for birds or small game. It's a little more digestible for a first-time hunter. There tends to be more opportunity, and you can usually find success easier than as if you're going for deer or a big game species. So yeah, we primarily, at least here on the West Coast for a lot of our events, we focus on waterfowl and upland hunting as first-time experiences, and then as people kind of graduate into the big game, we'll do smaller events for big game.
Anna, it looked like you had a comment.
Yeah, I still have a huge love of rabbit hunting. It's actually what I primarily do. And I think it's very fun, as far as habitat goes. Anything goes really, as long as you have permission if you're on private land. There's, on private land here in the valley, there's actually a favorite place for me. It's just a pile of tires, on this guy's land, and it's a rabbit, mansion, if you will. But I think it's very fun. The downsides are they're very cute and hard to shoot, and they're very fast. But I just carry around a little 22, and I go after the snowflies, so they're easier to see, little cottontail rabbits. And yeah, I think it's a blast. And if you don't get one, you get to walk a lot and chat a lot. You don't really have to be super quiet. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. I can definitely agree with that. And I don't know where this tire pile is, but maybe I'll butter Anna up a little bit, and figure that out. Cool. Joshua, did you want to chime in on this one?
Sure. I mean, the Colorado River up by kind of like towards Steamboat is a very special place for me for fly fishing and floating and things like that. And then Salida, the Arkansas River, is another location that I really enjoy doing a lot of fishing there as well. And then for pheasant hunting, definitely the plains on the east side of Colorado are really enjoyable. So there you go.
Thank you. And I'll kind of jump on where Joshua mentioned is that a lot of the places where you've had a very unique experience or a first time experience of harvesting an animal or certain species really do begin to have a really soft or special place in your heart. I can definitely think of a lot of places now where it's like, oh, I shot my first turkey here, or my first time being successful in a waterfowl hunt. I actually shot my first duck wing shooting out of a kayak and had no idea how much the recoil was going to rock that kayak to almost flipping over. So that's really fun. So thank you all for your answers on that. There was one, so just a minute ago. Oh, could any of you speak about engaging in hunting as someone with very limited free time, quote, free time? How do you think of hunting as more than recreation? So kind of two parts there, and you're welcome to take either part or both if you'd like.
As someone who, like I said, is part of that group that works various jobs in the valley, I don't have a lot of free time, but when I think about how it's going to supplement me and going to give me a good meal, and I love to share it with others, that's what motivates me to get out there. And I know I need the exercise. And yeah, for example, I was super busy last winter, but I was still able to go out and get a lot of rabbits for my dad, who had just moved to Colorado, and I made him German rabbit stew for Christmas, and he was just tickled. He loved it. He thought it was great, and so that made a really good memory. And so just keeping that in mind gets me out there.
Cool, awesome. Others?
All I can say is just like working out, you know, how you don't want to do it, but then when you do it, you feel so much better. Just for me, you know, it's like, I don't want to go out there and do this just because I don't got time, but it's that therapy that you get with it that you generally keeps you coming back. So make the time if you can.
Anyone else want to jump on that one or next? Okay. How can we hold accountable groups who are privileged and perpetuate harmful stereotypes around hunting?
I think just honestly, just speaking up. I mean, the way that social media is today, and the way that the word travels, just kind of putting something out there along those lines, standing up for what's right, can go a long way, I feel.
Anyone else? To jump in on that one?
I would just say education, education, as much as we can, trying to change those bad attitudes, negative attitudes, about it. So that's going to be up to all of us.
I think we have time for one more question. And what I would like to ask, this is for all panelists, as noted here in the question. Do animals have rights in the hunting game?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think animals deserve every bit of respect and I guess like pursuit of life than as we do. And instead of having like a dominion over wildlife, we should look at animals as we're in relationship with animals. That is something that I've learned as my time with hunting, but more from our CEO, Lydia, in her family's creation story. They talk about wildlife as if they're relatives, and they have deep rooted connections with the animals, and an understanding that sometimes we are going to utilize your life to perpetuate our own. And then we're going to also give back. And one day our bodies are going to give back to the environment to nourish potentially your descendants' life. So it's more of, I think it's having a different view on the hierarchy of life, and understanding that there is no hierarchy, or there shouldn't be a hierarchy, but there's more of a relationship and symbiosis happening.
Thank you. We have 1 minute or so. Joshua, it looks like you want to chime in.
I would say anywhere from, I mean, they do have laws like catch and release, the opportunity to keep beautiful fish in the water, and just being, following those laws. So there are ways to, you can't hunt on certain times, that is a protection of that animal. So there are ways that, I guess, if you look at it from a literal sense, that they do have rights, I guess, from that standpoint. Best I can say.
Anna, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just to add on to that, animals have a right to a quick death if you are going to take its life. And so that makes you a better marksman. If you feel weird about a shot, you shouldn't take it, because it's worse to hurt something and let it just go off in the woods rather than have something that's going to be merciful.
And Vicki, did you have a response to that question about animals' rights?
I agree with everyone. Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. This has been a very rich experience. So thank our panelists again. If we could all just give a round of applause once more for our panelists.